If you have ever played the critically acclaimed best action game of 2019, Devil May Cry 5, you've encountered this guy. His name is Urizen, and he uses the Yamato encased in crystal to protect himself when you fight him. So he sits behind his barrier and casts magic until you break it. Simple, right? Wrong. This boss has more going on behind the curtain than anyone has ever realized. Let's start by looking at Urizen himself. Initially, he sits upon his throne, connected to what is essentially an IV that's drip-feeding him human blood. This human blood is the source of his power, and since he's hooked up to the power grid, he's basically got an infinite amount of juice. As you progress the story, Nero manages to break through the crystal and wound Urizen. Angered and emboldened by his demonic energy, he severs the connection to the human blood source, ripping out the veins that previously acted as his food delivery service. No longer plugged in, Urizen is now running on his backup battery. He starts using melee attacks and tentacle swings in between magic casts, and once you break his crystal, he stops using magic altogether. But why? It all comes back to the Yamato, Urizen's crystal. This thing is actually the catalyst for Urizen's magic. In fact, it does so much of the heavy lifting that it loses health for every bit of magic that Urizen casts. And if you can manage to survive in Urizen's fight for around 13 minutes, the crystal will reduce itself to 1 HP. It will never actually break from its own magic casts, but any minor bit of damage would be enough to shatter it at that point. This mechanic is persistent throughout every Urizen encounter with the crystal present, but there's an even more subtle difference between his sitting and standing fights. While he is on his throne, Urizen will begin instantly recharging the crystal the second the player breaks it. Furthermore, he will never swing at the player or send tentacles to do his bidding. He will only ever cast magic while sitting down. But once he stands up and essentially unplugs himself from his human blood supply, he goes into a sort of resource management mode. He starts weaving melee attacks in between his magic casts because he's aware of the toll that each cast takes on his protective barrier. Additionally, after the crystal breaks, he doesn't instantly begin recharging it like he does when he's sitting down. Only after losing a certain amount of health will Urizen bring the crystal back. He's no longer connected to a power source with which to re-energize the crystal, so Urizen has to be tactical with when he decides to sap his own strength in order to protect himself again. As frequently as you fight Urizen throughout the game, these small details have slipped under the noses of many die-hard fans for years. I feel that they offer a new perspective to the fight and an interesting glimpse into the design philosophy of the creators when they were making this amazing game. Hopefully you found it interesting too. So if you ever struggle to beat Urizen in the prologue or Mission 8, just know that the longer you stay alive, even if you aren't doing damage, you are getting closer to victory. Thanks for watching, everybody.